I'm someone that likes to just build things up, and I think there's so much more growing to do for the org, and there's so many cool opportunities that I'm excited about. I'm just really thankful that the opportunity came my way.
Okay, so first, I have a thought, because you just did your intro. You were talking about most of the top teams now are using sports psych people, and just because you mentioned that, I'm kind of curious at what point do you think pro teams start to value that, and what impact do you think that has for a lot of these top teams, or I guess why do they use that?
So that's a great question, and honestly, unironically, I feel like you must have that Astralis jersey behind you for that reason, right? Because they're the first team that I can remember that really explored into this realm. And the benefits were seen almost immediately with that team. They went from having a lot of choking issues. For those of you that don't know, that team, when I was a pro CS player, they were notorious for placing third, fourth at tournaments. They were so close. And this was the team that when we would go over to Europe, we would scrim against them and they would body the shit out of us, in these scrims. They would destroy us. They were by far the best team we played against in scrims. And leading up until the semifinals, they looked like the best team in the tournament. But something weird mentally would happen to that team. And they were very vocal about working with a lot of sports psychologists and bringing these people into the org and really having a support structure that built out from just the players, bringing Zonic in as the coach. And I think it was Ave in as the general manager. And they had all these veteran presence within the team itself at that point. And man, just the way they conducted themselves in interviews on social media platforms and the things they said after winning and how they approached winning, that is what really opened my eye to the whole sports psychology aspect in gaming.
Gotcha. Okay.
Does that help?
Yeah, yeah, it does.
Yeah.
So I got a follow-up question, but with the Astralis thing, so I never worked with their CS team, but it was with their Rainbow Six team. They brought me in for that, and that team. And for anybody that saw my first episode with the R6 coach for SSG, he was the coach for Astralis when I was working with them. They had a phenomenal culture where everybody just bought into the idea of performance at whole. So not even just the sports side of things, but also the physical aspect of it, the team bonding aspect of it, the sleep side of things. They had strict rules of even how they would go into practices or watch VODs. They were very deliberate about everything external to just playing the game. And so Astralis brought me in for working with that team. And they took it so seriously, in fact, that, and I think we mentioned this in the first episode with Call Out, is that when we were at the Siege Invitational, which is champs for Val, it's the biggest tournament for Siege, a couple of our players or the team as a whole had, in terms of clutch percentages, double that of the second highest team. It was just absurd how cool they kept under pressure. So it was a 1v3, 1v4. They had so many clutch. It's that's what carried them to so far at SI or Siege Invitational, is just because they could go head to head at the worst possible odds, stay level, stay cool, stay collected, not tilt. Even if they lost a crazy clutch where they had 3 and the other team had 1, they would go into the next round unshaken or unfazed by it. It was crazy. So they took the sports psych side of things really seriously, and I'm assuming that's why Astralis valued some of these things. It's just because they saw the impact that their CS:GO team had with I can't remember who it was that was working with their CS:GO team. I remember doing a lot of reading on it, but yeah. Anyways, I'm going on a tangent. Astralis seems to care about those types of things, and but yeah, I did work with their R6 team. But I'm curious, so you said something right at the end of your statement there of the way that they think about winning.
Yeah.
What does that mean? Or their approach to winning? Is it just, I know we touched on a little bit when we were just chatting and shooting the shit yesterday about how some of the top teams think about winning in different ways than some of the mid-tier teams or whatever it is. And I'm just curious on your thoughts of what does the best of the best team think about winning?
Dude, okay, so this is such a complex question that I think the way I would describe this and the way I knew that Astralis turned the corner, and you can go back and look at this tournament. Actually, I remember the specific tournament, I'm pulling it up on my monitor right now. It was DreamHack Masters Marseille 2018. And at that point, people perceived Astralis as that third, fourth place team, right? They weren't going to make it. They weren't making enough roster changes. And I don't know, they were kind of flat. But I had just kind of like moved away. I'd scrimmed them recently, and I kind of heard rumblings like within the scene of how dominant they were. And I was listening to how they were conducting themselves in interviews. And then I heard from my wife, who stayed at the hotel one day because she came with me to this event to work. She stayed at the hotel and she went to the pool. And apparently, those Astralis players were at the pool watching VODs all together while swimming and having a good time. And they were mega focused, she said. None of them were not paying attention. Like, it was so opposite of everything that was happening in, like, NA culture within the CS scene and everything I had seen, right? Like, as the in-game leader, it was a lot of, you know, spoon feeding and me finding stuff and then bring it back to the team, or me doing all the research, kind of bring it back to the team, telling people we need to gather together and do these things. But it was like people were cracking jokes, and honestly, we were just having a good time. Astralis was like the team that managed to have a good time together. They liked each other and also stay giga focused to the job. And when she told me what she saw in the pool, I literally went to the analyst desk and I said, this team is going to win this tournament. And like I predicted that they would go on this run, like just because of the culture within the team. And because if you have that kind of camaraderie and culture within the team, there's no feeling of disappointment, I guess. And I think those were the things they were working a lot on leading into Marseille with their sports psychologist, who I found the article, actually. This sports psychologist may be the secret weapon of Counter-Strike champions Astralis.
Was it Mia? Mia Stelberg?
It was... What's her name?
Mia Stelberg. If it's a her, it's a Mia Stelberg,
yeah,
I think.
Must be.
Yeah.
And then OG hired her, I guess.
Oh, maybe. I don't know.
Like, man, it's just crazy. Like, she must have had so much success. Yeah, that's it. Mia Stelberg. Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. I know my sports like history.
Yeah. But it was like how they conducted themselves with each other, and then when they won, and I've seen this also with Fnatic and Valorant. We talked about it in the past, just their perspectives when winning, right? It's different than a lot of like what you see in the NA culture, which is like, like, fuck you, like, you didn't help me, you didn't bring me up, you didn't believe in me over here, I proved all you guys wrong. Like, you know, it's a lot of that in NA culture and kind of cockiness. Whereas if you watch how Fnatic conducted themselves, and this is something I brought up in my stream after Tokyo, you go to their Twitters and they're very proud of themselves and their team for what they accomplished and the hard work that they put in. They're not outcome focused. They're more focused on what it takes to get there, the path to becoming successful. And they know that if they keep on that path, they will be successful in the long run, because that style of work ethic and the structure that they built is what it takes to be a champion. And like, I don't see it in some teams. I do see it in others, but yet I don't know, like, what are your thoughts on, like, if that is so important, then how does someone like, you know, like Demon One pop off and win Valorant champions and do all of the things the other way?
Yeah, like, this is one of the things that you and I were talking about too, is that we have a tendency to judge a player or a coach's value based on the immediate results that they have. So like, they won a tournament or they won a season or whatever it is, and like, I think regardless of what your approach to a game is, you can always have pop-off moments. So you can have the wrong approach and pop off in a tournament. You can have the right approach and not pop off in a tournament. And I think we do a disservice when we judge a team or an individual based on like one good showing or one bad showing. Like, that's not really definitive of who they are. When you look at some of these top, like you're mentioning Fnatic, and the whole like commitment to the game, or like a respect or a discipline towards the game. They might have bad seasons or bad games, and this applies for every game, not just Val. They might have like bad periods of time, but there is this like consistent approach season after season after season. And when you have it that way, like, again, you can't judge somebody based off of one single event, because they might pop off and then fall down, or they might fall down and then pop off later. But if we look at players and teams that are committed to that growth, you will see like a constant trajectory upwards over time. And so it might be 3 seasons from now, they'll be a dynasty of a team, but right now they're underperforming. And I think that we're a little bit too short attention span, or too result focused to see the potential in somebody, and we just kind of like judge what's happening in this moment defines who that player is or who that team is. And if we can remove ourselves from that, it becomes a lot easier to approach team building. And I don't mean like team building activities types of things, but like actually like structuring a team, building a really solid roster. If we're thinking more in the long term and that gradual process over time, and you just kind of like expect the fact that there is going to be times when your team is going to lose, don't panic in that. Like, you have to be able to work through those things. But if you do, if you can commit to that long-term process, you can fail as a team, step back, and be like, okay, this is what we need to work out. This is where we shit the bed, and this is what we need to do. If you have that consistently, like, you're bound to grow as a team. You're bound to pop off at some point. It's just we throw in the towel too soon because we're judging individual results too frequently.
So do you think someone with kind of like, you know, the mindset I was talking about, say like a Demon One, or like how does someone like that, or like even Michael Jordan or like Kevin Garnett was known to be like a shit talker, you know, like these are very like fierce competitors that aren't afraid to like put their opponents down verbally, even in the heat of the moment. Like what drives that success consistency, I guess, with success?
Yeah, I mean, it's probably going to largely boil down to almost like a passion or obsession for the game itself, or respect for the game. Like, MJ, though he was incredibly, we'll use the word toxic, although he was like a bad or a tough person to play with as a teammate, his obsession with the game was not so much that like he needed to, well, he did need to win the game, but he was very, very hell-bent and focused on like understanding the foundational principles of what makes basketball great and how you learn that. So even though he's a huge shit talker, his obsession with actually learning the game on a day-by-day basis, and I would even say like the championships that MJ won, although were important to him, like he would win a championship and then be right back on the court the next day, basically grinding it out. So you can tell that the results weren't the end-all be-all for somebody like that, and probably same with like Demon One, is that there's an obsession or passion with actually understanding the game, less so with winning the game. It's just like, I need to, there's like a hunger or a drive to like, I have to solve this game. I have to figure out this game. I want to be part of this ecosystem.
Do you think it's like, do you think that kind of stuff is like wired in you from birth, or do you think that's learned?
Oof. That's a tough question. I'm sure we could probably like go through like athlete by athlete to figure out like this person it's been hardwired in, this person it's not. I would say that like there's probably not a right or wrong answer to that, because like you can probably see Magnus Carlsen is probably like partly hardwired to be good at chess because of just the way that his brain can mentally hold a picture of a chessboard, right? Like there's very few people that can recall games like he does. That's probably not something you can train in somebody. You can probably train it to a certain degree, but that's probably, he has a strength that is innate to him, and he's using that to his maximum ability. So you can train somebody to be good at something, but there's probably a lot of innate as well. And so I don't know if there is a right answer or right answer to that question. Yeah. It's a little bit of both. Yeah.
I always kind of wonder, like, can someone like that be created? Because I feel like a lot of the greats I've run into in esports, and this is something we talked about yesterday, is they have traumas kind of built into them. And that's a word that's like thrown around a lot, and I often don't like to use it, but in this context, I'm just referring to like, I don't know, very difficult upbringings, right? Whether it be you were bullied in school, whether you had like a lot of broken bones or something, and that caused you to stay at home away from friends. Though maybe you were moving a lot as a child and you weren't situated in a specific situation. Maybe you hung out with the wrong crowd and you got in trouble a lot, so your parents like didn't really accept you very much. Maybe they didn't accept gaming at all. Like there's so many things here. But then I also see in the latest kind of iteration of Valorant is people with like no traumas. Like when I was coaching 100 Thieves, I couldn't believe how like wholesome these kids were, like, and how amazing their parents were. I was just like, you guys are so respectful. Like they do whatever I want them to do. They speak to each other in kind ways. Like they know how to make the other person feel heard. These are all things I had to learn like in therapy as like a 30-year-old. Like I don't know. Kids are just wired differently these days or something. Maybe it's like the microplastics helping them out or something. I don't know.
Yeah, it's giving them. That's like the spider in Spider-Man is biting them. They're getting microplastic, boosting them. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, like, again, this is something that I think is not talked about often, but for almost every single sport, and obviously there's exceptions to this. This doesn't hold true to everybody, but it seems like one of the biggest predictors of who can actually like push the upper limits are those. I won't say trauma. I will say those who have endured a lot in their life, because to be the best of the best, like, you can train, in my opinion, you can train almost anybody to go to the professional scene. They might not be the best player in the pro scene, but you can probably get them there. But for the ones that are like the 1% of the 1%, you are breaking rules that seem to be impossible to break, like the marathon runner Kipchoge. Like, you can't comprehend the limits or the barriers that he broke. It's just absurd, right? And in order to break those barriers, you have to be able to endure the work, the stress, the pain, the sacrifice. You have to be able to endure so much to hit that level. And this is where kind of like the idea of trauma, you should never try and impose trauma on somebody to make them good at something, but that going through a lot teaches you how to cope with some of these things, hopefully. And so when you are going for something like being the best of the best in the pro scene, when those barriers are trying to push you back and push you down, and the stress is there, the sacrifice is there, the pain is there, the burnout is there, you're able to cope and move through it because you've dealt with worse, or you've processed these types of things in the past. And those who haven't dealt with a lot, they're going to be learning how to process those things, and typically that doesn't go so well, and so you'll remain kind of in that mid-tier in the pro scene. But yeah, I think that most people, with like obviously some exceptions to this, can be trained to at least be at the like the bottom levels of the pro scene. But to be at the top level of the pro scene in any sport or esport, you have to have almost endured something really, really harsh at some point. But the cool thing about the new generation, though, that I really like is that, like what you were saying, is like there is that respect, or there is like a little bit more emotional intelligence. And I think that's one of the superpowers of the upcoming generation, is that they have a deeper emotional intelligence than previous generations. So a little bit more respect, a little bit of emotional awareness, those types of things.
Yeah, I feel you. As a parent myself, just breaking the cycle, everyone's getting a little bit better. So.
Yeah.
But I was gonna tie this into something. I kind of lost my train of thought there, but let me think. So I do have so many other questions for you. I'm curious, like, how would you structure a team ideally? Like, how much do you want them visiting you per week? How much do you think is like healthy to practice? Like, and I guess, like, what level of hierarchy would you prefer in a team? Which is, I've never actually asked you these questions, so I'm very curious to hear your answer right now. I was gonna bring up like the fact that you brought up like the Michael Phelps book yesterday. I thought that was so interesting.
Oh, The Weight of Gold?
Yeah, that he was like very suicidal.
A documentary, but yeah, it's quick plug to that doc. It's a really good documentary because this is part of like what we were just talking about. Michael Phelps, there's some other Olympians in this documentary as well. The title is a beautiful title. It's The Weight of Gold, so it's like the cost of achieving gold, the Olympic level. The amount of suffering and pain that went into that is like almost mind-numbing. Like, it's crazy. Like, people see them standing on the podium. They see Michael Phelps, one of the most decorated athletes of all time, but they don't see like how much agony it was to get to that podium. And that documentary really shows you like what people go through to reach the top, not just to like get to the Olympics, but the ones that are going to the Olympics and consistently winning gold, the sacrifices and the pain they go through. It should be impossible. Like, it's crazy. Yeah. And so it's a really good documentary. I just forgot what your questions were, though.
No,
what was that?
It's all good. I really love that whole story of Michael Phelps, because like I see it a lot in esports with like the very top players. Like I've watched Simple, and he's the golden child of Counter-Strike, right? Like, he is the GOAT in almost everyone's eyes. This guy was statistically just on top of the world for years. I didn't even think it was possible to do the things he did. But then I would go to these tournaments over the course of my career, and over the course of also as a broadcast talent at the end of CSGO, and everyone would be out. Literally, he would be the only person in the player practice room grinding ranked up until like 3 a.m. He would be in custom servers. He would be playing bots. this guy has no fucking quit. Like, no, this is after he was considered the GOAT. Like, it's all he knew. It's all he knew how to do. I've heard stories of when he moved to North America from Ukraine. This was when he was in Team Liquid. And, like, some of the shit that happened is just, like, people would think it's laughable. Like, it's like that, like, a grown adult would do some of these things. But it's because he had the sacrifice to just literally wipe out all of his other responsibilities, all his other things that he could be doing with that time in the prime years of his life to really, he just wanted to be the best. And the way to be the best in his eyes was play as much as possible, do things that other people aren't willing to do, like learn and think about the game instead of just playing it. And it was insane to see that kind of work ethic, even from someone at the top already. Like, that's what the whole Michael Phelps thing reminded me of, actually. And then, I mean, myself, like, I played throughout college when I was making, like, no money in CS 1.6. I would have to go to the library. I would rent a private study room every day at, like, 7 a.m., which is right when Noble Library opened at ASU. I would get a private room, which was like a closet, literally like the size of this closet behind me. And I'd lock the door, and I would just study for, like, 5-6 hours. And actually, no, it'd actually be probably longer than that. And then sometimes I would have to go to classes to, like, take quizzes or exams and stuff like that. But most of the time I just didn't go to class because I learned how to teach myself so that way I could then go home and have a practice schedule for, like, a pro CS team, because we weren't, even though we were winning ESA lands and considered, like, the best in North America in 1.6 at the end, we weren't getting paid. So this was, like, pure passion at this point. It was, like, insanity. It's actually insanity, like, thinking about it from here. But, like, obviously I sacrificed a lot. Like, I went to ASU, like, a party school with, like, no parties. If I had, like, no friends, like, just locked myself in a private study room from the start of the day, left middle of the day, went home and played CS, and then repeated. It was just, like, it felt impossible, but here I am. Like, I somehow did it. I don't think I would do it again. But I'm also glad. I don't think I could do it from this point in my life. Like, if someone would be like, "You got to do that all over again," I'd be like, "Bro, fuck no, fuck esports."
So here, this is something I learned about my own journey, because, like, getting into my position, it's nowhere near as hard as it is being, like, simple or being you, obviously. But it was still a very because there's not a whole lot of resources in esports for people like me. So I had to fight for a very long period. It was about 2 years where I was working for probably, like, pro bono work, 10 hours, 11 hours every single day. I would get off of that and then go bartend every single night. Like, I'm a dude that has a master's, and I'm making no money, and I'm grinding bartending at night. Like, it was a brutal period of time in my life. But I wanted it so bad. But now I sit back and I think of, like, if I had to do that again, could I do another, like, 2 years of that? It's like, I don't know. I don't know if I could. And so it's like, to push to the top, you almost need a little bit of ignorance of what it actually takes. Yeah. Because if you have that knowledge, it's almost demotivating. If you're just like, oh, I can do this, and you have no idea what's coming, like, you can just keep on pushing and pushing and pushing, because you always kind of think it's around the corner, but it does take a little bit of ignorance to keep on pushing, for sure. And that's almost like I use ignorance in a positive way, I guess. Like, it's actually the thing that's pushing you, is that you're ignorant to how hard it's actually going to be.
Yeah, dude. So, like, I was so stupid at the time. Like, I was like book smart, but so stupid. So we won ESEA LAN. I can't remember which year it was. It was like, it had to be like season 12 or 13 or 10 or I don't know, somewhere around there. And it was $10,000 for first place. So each of us got $2,000, which at the time was fun. I was huge, balling. I was balling. Yeah. There was no VC money in gaming at that time. But I didn't know I had to pay taxes on that money. So then I got audited. I got fucking audited. I made, like, no money. And the IRS was like, you owe us money. I was like, wait, I had to pay money on this?
It's not charity?
Those were my early days of esports. I was so stupid. That's stupid.
Crazy. Yeah, same.
Yeah.
Same.
Okay. Let me go back to my original question.
Yeah, I was going to say, let's jump back to the question with something or whatever it was.
I was asking, like, how you would structure a team, because I'd never asked you this, but, like, how much would you want them seeing you on, like, an individual or team level, whatever's best? I don't know. I'm not sure. And then also, like, what hierarchy would you prefer? Like, do you want, like, an assistant coach, GM, or do you think that's, like, too many cooks in the kitchen? Or I don't know. Like, what do you think is best for, like, an esports team?
Yeah. So I'm going to give you like a little bit of a roundabout answer because I don't think there is one way to do this. But I'll start with like how often I would want them to see me. It would depend on the individual. I like chatting with players like once a week, once every 2 weeks, give or take. Even if it's just like 10 minutes to say like, hey, how are you? That kind of thing. Cool. We don't need to do anything profound every single week. It's not like that. The thing that I really want people to know though, and this goes out for anybody that might be listening to this that has a sports psych, mental performance coach that works with their organization, is don't use them just to resolve issues. They will help you enhance your strengths as well. So it's not something like, oh shit, my team's not working well, or I'm struggling with this, or there's a slump here, whatever it is. Like, definitely can help with that and like go to them with that. But when things are going good, that's when you can like really amplify where a team goes. Because like when things are operating really smoothly, now you can put the gas pedal on, you can push some limits, you can build on your strengths, you can build those strengths will then buffer you for the next time you have a slump. Like, utilize people like me or whoever's in your organization for while you're having a good period of time with your team, because that's actually like very beneficial as well. And I think people often see us as more of like a Band-Aid, I guess. Like when something's broken or something's in pain or hurting, we go get some help and then we go back to our standard schedule and whatever. So think about it as more, it's not so much like how often I want people to come to me or how often I want to meet with players. Ideally like once every 1 or 2 weeks would be awesome, but sometimes that's a little bit of a tall order. My one thought is like I want it to be something that's happening during the bad times and the good times, not just like a fix-it tool.
Yeah, you're like a divorce lawyer. Like if someone goes sees you, they're already fucked. Like it's over.
Yeah. Well, and then
I'm just kidding.
that's actually it. No, honestly. But then also what that does is it makes it almost like creates. It almost turns me into like a bad omen. So when I show up at a team, everybody's like, "Oh shit, the team is going through shit again." Right?
God
like,
damn it!
It makes it look like when I'm coming in, there's only something wrong happening. Whereas if you treat it as like both good and bad, then I'm neutral, and so there's not like that negative association with me. So, anyways, that's I'm essentially a divorce lawyer right now. So that's how I think about that in terms of like team structure. I think it really depends on the coach, and so I'm a huge believer of setting up the coach to run a ship kind of thing, or like to be the captain of the ship. The reason I say that is you cannot cookie cutter approach a team. Like it's just not possible. You're going to have, if we're taking CS or Val or League or Dota or whatever, it's a 5-person game. You will always have a different culture and personality emerge from the team, even if you change one person. But like 5 high-performing individuals are going to create like a completely different culture or environment, and you have to be ready to adapt to that. You can't just like say this is how a team should look, so the 5 of you have to fit into this box. That will fail on repeat almost every single time, and so it's very difficult to do that. And I think the best way to solve it is by picking, I guess it would start from the organizational level, is understand the type of coaches you want in your organization. Like think about that from your management, your upper management, whoever has to be involved with it. Think about the type of cultures you want in your team, and then when you have that understanding, go to the industry, find the coaches that you're like, okay, this person is like phenomenally gifted at coaching. They have the hard work, they have the work ethic, they have whatever it is that we need. Take them, put them in place of the team, and then say, we are here to support you. Go build your roster, go build your team, go structure the culture however you need. You do what you got to do. And the reason why I'm a big believer of that is because like if you bring in a coach onto a team, you're saying like this coach is the expert of the game, right? And so if they are the expert in the game, we have to trust that that's what they're going to do. And so set them up for success, send them into it, support them, understand that they're probably going to make a bunch of mistakes in that process, but that's okay. Send them out there, build the team, and then they will structure it the way that they think is best. And sometimes that works, sometimes it doesn't work. But for me, like as the performance or sports psych guy to come in and tell a coach how to do it, I don't think I could, because if I was the game, like if I was League of Legends is my game. So if I was coaching a league team, there were specific things that I would look for.
Sorry. I'm so sorry. Okay, go ahead.
11 years deep on that. Like it's a chronic illness.
No wonder you had to go into psych.
Yeah, exactly. That might be it, man. It's funny enough. I saw one clip of like the Fnatic World Championship when I was in high school. The first World Championship in League, and that one clip on Facebook sent me down 11 years of League of Legends, or 12 years of League of Legends.
Damn, wait, Fnatic won the first League championship?
Yeah,
Those motherfuckers won CSGO and League's first championship?
Yeah, they're the only, I think it's the only non-Asian team to have a team skin in League of Legends is Fnatic.
Wow. I actually didn't know that they won the first one. That's pretty crazy.
A long time ago, when League wasn't the version of League you know now. Like, graphics were different, the World Championship was different, teams, everything was a lot different. But yeah, they won the first one. And so I saw one clip of that, and I was sent down League for the rest of my life. It was the worst one clip I've ever seen.
That's hilarious.
Where was I? Anyway, so yeah. If you put a coach in place, like my idea of how I would coach a League team, it might work, but if I tell a coach how to do that, it's not going to work because they're not me. They don't have the same strengths. They have different strengths, have different weaknesses. They need to be able to build the team in the way that they think is going to run smoothly because then they have the agency, the responsibility, the knowledge, the expertise, and they can guide the players, they can structure culture, they can put up the boundaries. The coach has to be thinking about all these things, obviously, to do it well. But in terms of like how I would structure a team, it's more or less like be very, very deliberate with the coach you choose, put the coach in place, and then trust that they're going to make the right decisions. Understanding that as they make decisions, they'll probably make some wrong ones on that process. That's completely fine. If that ends up being that you chose the wrong coach, then that's fine. Like, that's also okay. Like, pull back and reevaluate that. But I think... I'm just kind of rambling now, but the structure of a team needs to be built through the coach because they're going to be the ones in the server day in and day out. They're going to be the ones that have to deal with the issues. They're going to see the strengths and weaknesses of the players. They're going to see the personalities of the players. It's very hard to tell a coach how to run a team without then kind of like restricting or what's the right word here? What's the opposite of enabling? Disabling?
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah, I know what
like,
you mean. You don't want to
you would hinder their ability to lead the team.
Yeah.
And so that's the way I think about it in structure. Is just like you focus on finding the coach and then trust the coach to structure the team right. And if you have good decision-making processes, you'll then pick a good coach in the process of that. In terms of hierarchy, I think that also kind of falls into the same thing. Like some teams really, really flourish with having a coach that is a really strong voice and says, like, this is the way that we're doing it. You guys show up to practices. I will tell you what to do. You guys go do this and whatever. Like that hierarchy, it's very clear that there's like hierarchy there. And some coaches work much better in a community kind of team where you come together, you discuss, you debate, whatever. And like, if that works, that works. If the other one works, that's great. It's going to really depend on the type of coach that you put into place. But I think that there just needs to be a lot of trust in coaches in general.
Yeah, no, I agree. And that's what was so cool about like my time frame with 100 Thieves is I feel like they gave me that power. Like they let me build the team. And, you know, like I'm not gonna lie, like I don't know everything. And I didn't at the time. And I that's why to this day, I still give so much credit to Mike because Mike had coached Optic before. And I had never coached a team. I had in-game led a team without a coach. And that's a very different... That's how I was a pro player in CS. Is like we didn't really have a coach in a lot of my years. And I didn't want one because I wanted like full control at the time. And at this point, I think like I would probably work better with a coach, just knowing what I know now and how to communicate. But going into like the initial part where I didn't have a coach, I had to structure the team with people to like lighten the mood. So I had someone like Nothing on the team in addition to like Freakazoid, and they were very, very pivotal in helping the team culture in my eyes. And I would have never removed like those players from the team, even if like the community definitely was like asking for us to like cut Nothing in certain occasions because of various things. But what they didn't know is what he brought for like team culture and team atmosphere, which I perceive as like a very important thing. And obviously you need highly skilled players as well, like Shroud and Skadoodle. And that's how like that team was successful without having a coach is I made sure like, I don't know, the personalities worked. Yeah. And I kind of brought that into like 100 Thieves. When I made the 100 Thieves roster, you know, like I asked Mike what like a normal schedule would look like for practicing at the pro level because I had never been part of a team. So I fully like used his knowledge, right? And I took that, and then I also was kind of like having phone calls with everyone and like so many people, and the org wanted to like change the culture in the team. So you know, like moving away from some like the bigger names like Hiko, and Ethan was a hard one. Like obviously Ethan just won the Valorant championship. And he was one that like I sat on the fence for like 2 weeks actually, and he didn't even know if he wanted to resign. Like he had offers from other teams, and because of the fact that Ethan had his like foot in, foot out type of thing, it had nothing to do with anything else. And he didn't fully believe in like young up and coming talent at the time. Like,
Gotcha. Okay.
So like I was envisioning building the team off of like young talent that kind of knew each other a little bit and could communicate well, and then having like a couple of veteran presences on the team. So like scaling up. So I had like a 17-year-old, an 18-year-old, a 20-year-old, 25, 26. And it was like, all of this stuff is kind of by design, in addition to like picking out the roles, having an in-game leader, and all this other stuff. There's so many things at play, and obviously there's so many choices when it comes to building these teams. But I think actually like team culture is the biggest thing. Like I firmly believe that like the way people communicate to each other, so that way they feel heard, in addition to like the other person they're talking to feeling respected. I think that's like probably the biggest thing in teams. And I feel like that's like one of the key reasons why we were successful off the jump. Like we had 0 points going into split 2 and we made champions. Like that was a huge accomplishment. It sucked that we all got COVID at champions and like we couldn't really play to our ability. But you know, it was still it was a lot of fucking work. I'm not gonna lie. Like it's crazy. Like it's crazy what coaches have to do, I feel like, to be successful. But then I also see other coaches, like you said, which are more like morale boosters. Like they must have like a lot of experience and guidance from within the team to like create and develop new tactics and strategies, as well as like innovate. I never understood how like those teams operated actually, like, but those teams have been successful, and that's part of the reason why I think like I'm a huge buyer on like team atmosphere, because I saw in Counter-Strike like some of the coaches that succeeded. I was like, this guy couldn't explain a strat to me, but you know, they're making deep runs in the majors. Like, you know, like there has to be more to it. And I think eventually I started like figuring that out like in the Valorant days, but it's crazy. Like the whole building a roster thing in the coach's hands, I agree. I think that's like super important.
Yeah, definitely. And I think the culture really is without a doubt one of the most important things. Obviously I'm biased when I say that because my job revolves around culture, but I think it is crucial to have the right culture in a team. And I'll say that I don't think there is a correct culture either, and this really depends on the 5 people that you have. Like I've seen teams that are phenomenally successful when you have 5 people who are upset and bicker and yell at each other, and then they somehow go into competition and they just slaughter everybody. Is that culture broken? Probably not, man. Like they're successful and they've been doing it for a long period of time. There's also teams where you have people who are very soft-spoken, they beat around the bush, and like they're successful as well in their own right. And which is the correct culture to have? Both can be correct. It's just, I think one of the things that people don't realize about culture is it can't be forced and it can't be accidental. If you hit either of those points, then you're in trouble. And so, I mean, sometimes you get accidental cultures that work for a short period of time, but when I say they can't be accidental and they can't be forced is, one, you shouldn't leave culture up to chance. You should be deliberate about it. You should, like what you were saying, it took you a long time, a lot of work. You should be thinking about the type of players you want, and the type of players that you end up picking are going to create the culture based on like how you structure things. But it also, when I say it can't be forced, I mean like I can't say that this culture is correct. I come in and tell a team that they have to do it this way, or your personality should be this way, or you should interact this way. Because like I'm forcing people to be like that, like they're going to become very inauthentic versions of themselves, and they're not going to play to the best of their ability because they're not being enabled. They're too busy trying to be someone else or trying to fit into the mold that you're creating. And so the way that you don't have an accidental culture and the way that you don't have a forced culture is what you did, right? Like, so you have to figure out the type of people that you want before you think about the people, the specific people. Figure out like the type of people you want, the type of culture you want. So if you're a deeply analytical coach, you probably want some emotional leaders on the team because you're going to bring the ideas, the strats, all those types of things. And you're going to need people that come into the from the player perspective. You're going to need people that come in and create the bond, the friendship, the laughs, like the memes, the bits, the jokes. You're going to need those type of people. If you're the kind of coach that is like really good at resolving conflict, high emotional intelligence, is able to create like a really good vibe and keep things light, you might need players that are highly analytical, that can study a VOD and actually come up with all these strats and say why this is working and this is wrong and this could be better. Like you need people like that because you don't have that skill. And to be deliberate about building culture just means like you understand the strengths and the weaknesses, and you're being very, very disciplined and deliberate with the type of players that you're bringing on to make sure that all of these bases are covered. And one of the things that I think teams should start thinking about too is that leadership in a team, whether it's a coach or players, isn't just reserved for an IGL. Like, we often think of the IGL is the equivalent of like a captain in say like hockey or something like that, right? Like, we think about it that, but the way that I think about teams in general is that there's different traits of leadership, and you'll have the IGL, the person that probably understands the flow of the game, the analytics of the game better than anybody else, but they might just be like a complete dry person that has not a whole lot of things to say outside of that. They aren't adding personality or vibrance or anything like that to the team. So you might need a person in that team that has like an emotional leadership quality that actually can bring those vibes. And then you might need somebody that has like really, really good communication skills, and that's like where they shine. Thinking about your players is like, in terms of leadership, that each person on the team that you bring in should have some type of leadership ability. And if you find all the right pieces, you put them in place, you'll have a really good analytical mind. You'll have somebody that's holding the vibe together and the emotional side of things. You'll have like the person that's trying to bring everybody together to do stuff after scrims. And like, you need all of these different types of leaderships. So I guess like thinking about structuring a team, if you're a coach, say for example, think about the type of players that you need based on like your strengths and weaknesses, and then figure out what types of leadership you need in the team, and then find the people that match that. When you're trialing, don't just look for players that are really, really good at the game, because if you just pick 5 players that are really good at the team, you're kind of creating an accidental culture. Who knows what's going to happen, right? Like, it just might completely fizzle out. People might not get along, all sorts of things. So like, have an idea of what you're trying to create, and then as you're trialing and looking for players, measure them against that, as well as like if they have to meet that baseline threshold of skill, but make sure you're bringing in the type of players that are going to match well with the type of team you want to create.
Yeah, dude, like I completely agree. You definitely need like a second leader like within the team. For me, like, it kind of stemmed from like nothing again, and like even Freakazoid to an extent, like but there was like definitely a hierarchy, you know, like if they said something. So the way that I operated back then is a lot different than now. I didn't have as good of communication skills. Now that I have kids, I'm a little bit better, hopefully. But so like Nothing and Freakazoid, I was very comfortable talking like sternly and even at times like yelling at them. But like Shroud and Skadoodle have like more passive personalities. Like, those are like private messages like away from the team. So like just like that kind of built, right, where certain people are leaders and they're like okay with just being like immediately like shut down even amongst like the group, and they're okay with having their like thought process like vetoed, because not everyone is comfortable with that. Like, I'm not gonna lie, like, not everyone is comfortable with being amongst a group of peers and suggesting something and having someone be like, no, this, like, and it's, you know, like teaching. Okay, like, let's pivot now.
Okay, pivot.
So when it comes to comms, do you ever like work with teams on like how to communicate? Because something I've always like really drilled into the players on my teams is don't ask questions, talking commands.
In game or out of game?
In game, like never ask a question, because it's like it's just leading to like a conversation that is actively taking your mind off of the game. It's like, you know, instead of saying like, I just saw like this here, like should we go A? Should we do this? And then all of a sudden, like, instead of saying like let's go A and then having like a leader veto it or just be like, yeah, let's go. It's like all 4 people are immediately thinking, should we do this? Like, I don't know. Like, wait up. Let's like, I don't know. Like, what's the answer? Like, I think we should. So there's no immediate response. And in esports at like the top level, there needs to be immediate responses. And this is like one of the hardest things to drill out of a player, in my opinion, like, because it comes from like confidence in what you say and believing your abilities, just being very confident with them. And even, you know, like eventually like it does come through, like instead of saying like, you know, like, should we do this strat? You just say it, and you're okay with someone saying, no, let's do this instead. You know, like, and then afterwards you talk about why that's the case, or, you know, like why you wanted to do this, and it's okay to make mistakes. That's how we learn, kind of thing. Like, we learn this in scrims throughout the day, so that way when it happens in a match, the chances of it being like the first time occurrence is very, very low. But if we're constantly asking questions and like our brains are scrambled trying to like hold these conversations in these hectic moments, we're going to move slow as fuck. We're going to lose.
Yep.
Like, what do you think about that?
I think you're correct. I think that in game you should almost always have commands, even if it's not coming from the IGL. And I'll tie this in. I'll give you a couple of reasons as to why. So, number one is language in humans is very, very deeply coded in our brain. Like, it is one of the things that we are most profound at as a species is language. It's just like deeply wired in our brain. When we think about communication in general, a lot of what is conveyed is through like not the actual words that are said, but like inflections and tones and all those types of things, and those invoke emotions in us. They change the way that we think, all that kind of stuff. And so when you ask a question, you are more or less like triggering the other person's brain to start thinking about something. So if I say, should we do this, I'm almost like putting you in a place where your brain automatically starts to like process all these different outcomes and start to think and analyze. And like, if I'm thinking about you being in flow state, I don't want you thinking about that. Like, I want you to just do. I want to come out of muscle memory. You've been training for years and years and years on this. So everything that like you've worked on so far, I just want that to come out in that moment. I don't want you like overthinking. I don't want your like learning centers in your brain to turn on. I just want execution. And if I ask you a question, I am inadvertently turning those parts of your brain on. And so then you start to think and you start to like doubt or question or consider different outcomes, and all we need is somebody to just like execute in that moment. So that's why I think commands are really good, because if the reverse of asking a question is to tell you what to do, I say do this, and your muscle, we'll call it muscle memory, your muscle memory or like your motor cortex just starts to produce that outcome. So if I say like take this fight, take A site or something like that, you'll just like do that because you don't have to think about what the outcomes are. You were just told to do, so now your motor cortex can produce the biomechanical skill to force you into doing that exact thing. Might work, might not work, doesn't matter. You just did that automatically, and that's what we want. So that's one of the reasons why I think commands are really important. And I'll tie this into a concept, and I can't remember the name of it. I send this to pretty much every player, so any players that I've talked to have already seen this video, but there's this video of this submarine commander who's running, like, submarines are very difficult ships to run. Like, it's a lot of technical stuff that goes into it, and you're underwater, so you can't really get help, and things can blow up, all sorts of things. And what he noticed is that the ship was running a little bit, or the submarine was running a little bit inefficiently. It's because people would come to ask his permission to do certain things. Like, they'd be like, Captain, requesting permission to do blah, 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 right? Like, they request it, and he eventually realized that he needs to give agency and urgency to the people under his command, and so he changed the structure of communication within that sub. He's like, if you come to me and ask me a question, I will say no. If you come to me with an intention, you can do it. So instead of saying like requesting permission to do this, he would the way that language would be used is, Captain, I intend to do this. So it's more of like a command, like I am doing this, and then the captain can always like veto it or whatever. But it's like it's an actionable thing. It's not a question as to like, hey, can I go do this, or do I have your permission to do this? It's just like, I'm going to do this, right? Yeah. And so it's like you can see the process of thinking is a little bit more effective there, because things get smoother. You're not starting to question things. You're not starting to doubt things. Obviously, those things will still creep in from time to time, but that's kind of like the principle that I'm drawing off, is like speak with intention. Sometimes that intention will be wrong, but at least what you are doing is going to be more likely to succeed, or a higher probability. And like, we can, if it was wrong, we can solve that later, but in that moment, I need you to speak with intention. So whether that's an IGL making a call, make that call with intention. Say what you're doing. If you are you got a piece of info and you're mid-rounding and you're not the IGL, like you're the INI, the Senti, whatever it might be, and you got a piece of information, don't ask for permission with that. Speak with intention. If there is something that you're missing, sure, somebody can come in and veto it, but you aren't asking to do something. You are telling what you're being intentional with your comms, because then you're not triggering people to start contemplating and thinking and doubting and all these other types of things. So I think you pretty much nailed it, because I'm a huge fan of speak with intention. I use speak with intention instead of commanding, because it's a little bit softer. But I think that teams need to do that. But there's a lot of fear of failure in a lot of players, and so they use questions,
problem,
right?
They don't accept responsibility for the idea.
Exactly.
Like, they actually want to do what they're asking, but they don't want the blame of if it goes wrong. They want that blame to fall on someone else with like who's more up in the hierarchy.
or that, or also sometimes people just like don't believe in themselves as well, so they get a piece of information and they're like, okay, my teammates are smarter than me, or like innately they think something along those lines, and so instead of saying something, they ask a question because they're trying to like pass it off to somebody that is smarter than them, when in reality, like, probably everybody in that server is within a certain margin of like the same intellect. So like, trust in it, and don't be scared. And teams have to work on this very actively, but create an atmosphere in the team where nobody is scared of making the wrong call. Because if even one person doubts themselves or is scared of like, if I make this call, my team does this, and then we lose the round because of that, like, everybody's gonna be pissed off. If you are scared of that and you doubt your ability already, you will never speak with intention, because you're always going to be trying to pass it off to somebody else to make the decision. You'll give the information, but then they have to make the decision. And we need teams to just be like, piece of information, boom, piece of information, boom, piece of information, boom. Like, that's what we need, but you have to have a culture of no fear of failure. Because if you get chastised, or people make fun of you, or people put you down because you made a bad decision, you're probably not going to do it anymore. And the last thing before I'm done this ramble, I think teams also have to get comfortable with, or individuals need to get comfortable with the fact that somebody criticizing your idea or your play is not them criticizing you as a person. Those are separate things, right? Like, if I say, yo, Sean, like, your play was bad, we should have been doing this, I'm not saying, Sean, you're a shitty player, you should stop playing this game, get off my team, right? Like, I'm not attacking you personally. I'm bringing up a play that you made, or a decision that you made. But people often take feedback as very personal, as like they are attacking me. And if you feel like you're being attacked, then it's going to be very hard for you to step up and put in the information or make the calls. And so also, like, one, the team as a whole has to create a ecosystem or an atmosphere where there isn't a fear of failure. And I usually use the words like you celebrate the failure. But then also the individual side, you have to learn how to separate somebody criticizing your play, and that doesn't mean that they're criticizing you as a person.
Yeah, dude, like, you fucking nailed it.
Nice.
I feel like a lot of people are probably wondering, like, well, how the fuck do I do that at my team? Because I have this like 16-year-old that doesn't like talking, and like this person or that person that's probably like, I'll get into that in a second, but you know, like, certain people aren't comfortable doing those things. So something I did in 100 Thieves to kind of get this to happen, like, kind of crafted it, was one day I was just like, all right, over the weekend, pick a map, pick a half, everyone bring a pistol for the next practice. And it was basically like, I had them fill out like all the pistols. So some people had like 2, other people had 1, and we did those pistols. So like, they felt like they had agency in creating and designing the strats. No one had any say in vetoing it. It had to be done. So like, they felt like they were heard strategically, and it wasn't just like all me or all Stellar, who's the in-game leader for us. You know, like, there's a lot of little tricks like that you can do, or even if you want to do like a day of practice where the in-game leader doesn't in-game lead. I mean, we kind of luck boxed into that because Stellar got like really sick one day and like his voice went out, so it was just like a group effort. Like, that kind of stuff helps a lot too. And I'm not saying like that's how it always should be, but it'll help people feel more comfortable in stepping up and communicating, because people fall into patterns. That's just how humans work. And if they feel like, you know, like they can do less work and like play better, which is probably what they're aiming for when they don't calm, like, they're gonna do that. Like, that makes sense. That makes total sense, actually. Like, you know, and I think like you have to like make efforts to break out of those molds sometimes. And the good teams like understand that kind of stuff will happen. Like, you'll get stagnant in your thought processes and kind of maneuver around.
Yeah. Well, and a way of thinking about this too is that, like, in moments of stress, humans will typically default to the path of least resistance. So if you're somebody that doesn't like to talk, when the play has gone wrong, the team is upset, something is on the line, you're in a championship, you are probably going to default into the path of least resistance for yourself. Some people, that might mean that they stop talking, and other people, like, we jump back to MJ here, when the pressure was on, his path of least resistance was to be the one that was vocal, so he would default into that, right? And so shaking it up a little bit is a good way at breaking the default, because it's important that you break those defaults, because those defaults are going to be the thing that kind of keep you plateaued, because you're just reverting to the thing that you've always done, and the thing you've always done might have gotten you to where you are, but it's not going to take you to the next stage. So you have to find ways to break people of that, we'll call it like the comfort zone, or defaulting into the path of least resistance. And doing stuff like what you just said. I'll give you an analogy of how we can like conceptualize this a little bit. And this was this analogy is stolen from a different concept as well, and I'll explain that as well. But if you think about like your brain as a mountain and you're skiing down it, the more times you ski down the mountain, the more pathways there are carved. And then when you go down it the next time, you're more likely to just follow the track that was already carved into the mountain. So it's harder to go off onto the powder, and you kind of just like follow that one track all the way down. And that's like your default response. When you start to use, we'll call it novelty, but when you start to use like different strategies, like people trying the IGL for a day, people bringing in their pistols, people doing all sorts of things, you can think of that as like a fresh snowfall on the mountain. And so now there's no tracks to follow. They have to start carving new tracks. And by continuing to do these new innovative things, you're adding more snow. So people can't get into their default. So they're getting more exposure to new ideas, to more experiences. And now you have somebody that's able to produce a lot of different skills because they didn't get too rooted in that one pathway. And so I like that innovation a lot. Anyways, I'll stop there. But that's kind of my thought on it.
I like those thoughts. What do you think about people like overcalming versus undercalming, like kind of like along the same train of thought? Because so I've had teammates, and this pissed me off so bad as like an in-game leader, that overcalmed when they like first hit like a stage environment. They overcalmed and like basically flooded our communication, and they're like saying everything that's fucking happening. And I actually think that is worse than undercalming. I'm like a firm believer as like, if you overcalm because you have so much anxiety, like you're calming like every fucking footstep you hear, every nade, you know, like everything you see, even though you have 3 people around you that are all seeing the same thing, even though it's showing up on the radar and you're playing with pro players that know how to look at the radar, you don't need to communicate everything. It's actually hurting the team so much more than undercalming, unless of course you are the in-game leader. If you're the in-game leader and you're like you have stage fright, you're not calming, then that's a whole different story. Like I think that's pretty bad. But I like our whole team was livid at this player. I'm not going to even name the player, but like you know, it was something that immediately like I had to iron out right after the game, and like we worked on it immediately, and it was all better literally like within the tournament. It was when I was on Misfits for ESL Pro League, and we placed like 3rd, 4th in like the finals, which was crazy for that team. But that was a crazy experience, because normally when people get nervous they undercalm, like you said, but this was like the opposite. It was like he was so nervous he just,
well, the adrenaline system kicks up, and then you're just like go, right? And like, so some people start to overcalm. It's more frequently that people undercalm, but it definitely, like, when people feel anxiety, some people get over jazzed up and just start spewing everything. And I agree. I think I can't say whether it's like better or worse than undercalm. You know what? I will say that I agree with you on this, and I'll give you my reason as to why. So, have you ever been, either you're driving or somebody else is driving and they're trying to like parallel park or something, and they turn off the music?
Bro, I can't parallel park.
Okay, well, you know how like people sometimes like they get into like traffic or something stressful on the roads, they turn on the music? It's because like sometimes noise, because there's like the way that your brain just works, it's just like sometimes auditory processing interrupts your ability to actually produce output. And so you have somebody that's overcalming, it can actually interrupt somebody's in-game skill expression. So like somebody's aim could decrease because there's too much noise or too much overcalms happening. Same way that it is harder to drive in a stressful situation when there's loud music playing, because that noise is interrupting your ability to focus on that moment, and then something decreases. So overcalming is definitely bad. I also think about in the way that if you are undercalming, the team is losing out on one person's information, right? So that's like 20% of the information or something like that. If you are overcalming, you're flooding the comms, which means it's harder for other people to speak. It's harder for other people to be heard. It's harder for people to think or to make other calls. And so because you're overcalming, you're stealing the other 80% of communication as well. If we just do some quick math on that, like if you're undercalming, they're losing 20%. If you're overcalming, they're losing like 80%, right? And so overcalming can interrupt a lot of things. And I think a lot of it is just like, I would say it's easier, that being said, it's easier to teach somebody who's overcalming to calm down than it is for somebody who is undercalming to calm up. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I agree with that. And that's actually insane. I never really thought about it like the 2080 way.
Yeah,
That's so smart.
It's because like if let's say that you, me, and 3 other people are playing the game, and I'm overcoming, and I'm like going really loud, like I'm starting to scream the call outs, and I'm repeating it, like I'm just yelling, I don't know, like one shot, right? Like one shot, and I'm saying it repetitively. I'm drowning you guys out because of how loud I am. I'm also drowning you out because I'm stealing the airwaves by just saying the exact same shit on repeat. Like both those things are unimportant. I should have to say the ideal comm structure is I should be able to say something in a moderate voice one time. If you can do that, the urgency in that moment makes you feel like you need to be loud and say it a bunch of times. But if you can do it that, and all other 4 people can do that as well, you're all having like a relatively calm communication while a very intense moment is happening. And so nobody's getting drowned out. Your brain's not getting overwhelmed by all of these calls. You're not shutting down. Your aim's not dropping. You're not getting annoyed. All because everybody's like keeping relatively reasonable comms. But a moderate voice with like saying it once without repeating. Like that's the ideal thing. Obviously that's not always possible, but that's what you really want in people, I think.
Oh, for sure. I think like bro, some of these players I play with could literally be like play-by-play casters, like walking over, throwing the smoke. I'm like, bro, we literally practiced this like 100 times. Like, we know you're gonna throw the smoke at this time. That is how the strat is designed. You don't need to fucking narrate yourself. So like, one dead, 2 dead. I got two. Like, bro, the kill feed's right here. We all see it. We all see the kill feed.
Here's a question for you. So, do you think that they are doing that because they are micromanaging and don't trust their teammates to know, or is it just like the nerves are making them unable to inhibit some of their communication?
I think the way comms are taught by like it's kind of ingrained in people, like as like casual players, like before they become pros. And I think like there's not a lot of experience teaching players like at the top unless they make it to one of the top teams. So by the time they even get there, they have a lot of this stuff ingrained in them. In Valorant, most of them just like have it because they haven't really thought these things through. I think like no one feels good at the end of the game if someone's like, bro, you don't even calm, like you didn't even say anything. Like that has come someone's way in FPS gaming, no matter who you are. Like honestly, I've gotten that because there's been times on Sunday at nighttime I don't want to talk to any of these motherfuckers. Like I got kids and shit. Like I'm tired, bro. I'm not calling for you. Like, so I don't blame them because they have that anxiety in them of feeling like under-calming is the problem, and no one's ever told them that over-calming is the problem. Like no one's ever said these things to them because that's just kind of what's ingrained in FPS culture. Like I got one long. Like, bro, we know you got one long. It's literally on all of our radars in the HUD in the top right of the screen. Like it's right there. You don't need to say that, but everyone does it. Like everyone does it. It's also like it might be some kind of like dopamine release. Like look at me, I did the good thing. I got the kill. You know, like they want like validation for that kill. That could be a reason too. And I understand, but at like the very, very top level, it's kind of important to cut those things out in order to like make the next leap. Yeah,
it's funny, like the dopamine validation thing I think is probably true, but also there's a defense mechanism that kicks up here as well. Is like if I'm taking a fight and I hit 120 and they kill me, in order to show my team that I'm not dog shit at this game, I like overemphasize the fact that, oh fuck, 120, like how'd they kill me, right? Like they say those types of things as like as a way to just like say that I'm like, how the hell is this happening? I'm good, I'm better than this person. It's like a defense mechanism to make you not look as bad as well. And I think getting players to move away from that, I don't know if you'd agree with this, but getting players to move away from that, because that's kind of dead comms. Like you're not really saying anything in that moment. You're just trying to explain or defend something. And moving players away from that to still give like actionable information rather than just saying like, oh fuck, 120. I don't know how they got that. Like, I don't know what your thoughts are on that.
I think so like the column should be like 120 long, like covey, like I don't know, like whatever you see. So like if it's like guy deep set, like bait set up, you know, like 2 there, 1 there, doesn't really matter. Like all info based. And the way like I usually operate in my teams is kind of like taking it somewhere else now, is in those moments, right? Like the strat is either going to succeed or fail. And if you did 120, you're like, oh fuck, I should have got that at 120, blah, blah, blah. Like that's something that either it depends how good your team is at communicating, because I've had teams that at the end of the rounds, we say, like, do we lose that round because of skill? Did we lose that round because of the tactic was shit? Or did we lose that round because the other team outplayed us? Like, should we continue doing this type of thing? Like, there's like a kind of like branch of questions that you have to answer as far as like how you lost the round. And there's going to be a lot of fucking rounds that you lose because of skill. That's just how FPS games work, and you have to be able to distinguish that. Like, it's such a problem in like ranked of Valorant where people are so outcome based. Like, they cannot process the fact that, like, oh, that was actually the correct idea. We took an empty site and we just lost like a 4v5 retake. Like, they only had 4 players live and they just retook this site. That was actually the right play. And then I got people on my team like, I told you we should have gone C, bro. Like, I told you. I'm like, dude, what are you talking about? Like, you need to actually like analyze what happened after the fact. But like when you overcome in the moment, it's no good. Like you said, it just floods the comms and takes people's mind off of important info. Like, is that guy running away? Is that guy about to get a pop flash from some deep ang that you might need to hear? You know, like, and all of those things are lost if you overcome in that moment.
Yeah. Okay. So here's a question, because you kind of brought up something here with like people are so outcome based, and we were talking a little bit about this earlier. This is a little bit of a pivot of what we were talking about, but either from like your perspective as when you were coaching or when you were a player, how do you teach a team or an individual who is very outcome focused to understand the concept of you can have the exact right call, or you can do the right thing and the wrong outcome can still happen? Like, that's possible. It doesn't mean that we should run away from our thoughts. It's just like something went wrong and we lost. Like, how do you teach a player to not be as focused on that from your perspective?
You have to really look at like all of the things that happen. So say like, you know, like we did like a quick A default on Haven where we're just approaching the site and we fault line through default and we omen blind like through short A or something, and we aftershock the short A cubby. Well, if the guy like swings out on like the second aftershock, like he tanks one of them and gets like 2 people short A, like right before he's about to die to the aftershock, it's like, oh, the strat actually worked. We just need to learn how to stagger better or delay our peaks in short A, so that way that guy can't do that next time. And if the guy, you know, like on the other hand, say like the guy is like back hell and the breach stun, which cuts across like default, doesn't get back hell, we have to then determine like, okay, what is the flow of util that we need to change actually? So like one is like a positional change and the other one's like, okay, this guy can't be cleared by util in the back hell position, but it's not a great spot. He can't like have any support from this angle. So when our jet dashes into the cloudburst right side site, let's have a breach flash going in like a little bit earlier, so that way jet can like immediately run out of the cloudburst like with the breach flash. The cloudburst should be like clouded out to block the spawn angle so that you're safe from spawn, and you can get a 1v1 on the guy back hell who should be theoretically blind in that moment or turned. If the guy isn't blind, then you fix the flash. If the guy is blind and gets the kill, then you just say, well, that was unfortunate. We need to do that again. Like, it wasn't the strat. The guy killed me blind. The guy killed me stunned. The guy killed me in the aftershock. Like, you know, like, there's certain things you just have to really think, like, sometimes, yeah, the strat will work, but it'll be like a positional timing thing. Other times, the strat won't work and it will be like unlucky. Like, you know, people can spam you through smokes. And if that's the case, like, maybe you think about how you want to approach those smokes. Like, are you getting unlucky all the time? Are you getting spammed through smokes? Well, maybe that's because you're sitting in the fucking smokes for too long. Or maybe it's because, like, the lead up is so obvious. Maybe you need to put extra pressure on B or C right before you, step into the smoke. So that way, this guy who's in the A site spamming the smokes, all of a sudden he's not as comfortable because now you put pressure on B and C, which has caused like rotates to flow across the map. So he's like now alone. And he knows if he spams a smoke alone, he's very, very vulnerable. So like there's like other adjustments like that you can make. There's so many like little things that you can think through to make things work better, but there's also times when you should do nothing. Like if you're playing against a team of fucking 5 ults and you do your A exec and they just like slaughter you with the ults, you're like, okay, maybe
tough shit. Do it again.
Maybe
Yeah.
that was just like we lost because they had ults, but maybe we should have done something to bait those ults out. And that's like, this is the progression of like pro Valorant. If you watch it, is like they'll realize like, oh, teams like using their ults in this way, and you'll watch like an attacking breach on Haven approach the A site, and you'll notice like the defenders are like dipping their toes in the water in the, like the A site. Like, we want to make them think we're playing the A site so that way they use this breach ult, but we also don't want to be in the A site if they just blindly use the breach ult. So we have to like, and then if we're completely out of the site, they're just not going to use the breach ult. They're going to sense with like a Sova dart or some shit like that we're not in the site because there's no counter util, there's no spamming, there's nothing. And then they're going to have a breach ult in the post plant, and then we're really fucked. So like there's all these like delicate balances in Valorant that it goes so far. It's a very complex game that honestly, like, you really have to analyze like why a strat didn't work. And very frequently it has nothing to do with the strat and everything to do with like these little like micro thoughts like around all like everything else that's happening.
Yeah, and I think this moves back to that conversation again earlier that we're having of like getting players or teams to think more process oriented rather than just results based analysis, because that's a danger to everybody in general for decision making. It's very easy to make a decision after everything is done, right? Like, oh, we should have gone C, or like I knew we should have gone C, like you said. And I see people talk like that all the time, but the reality is like you didn't know that we should have gone C. Like if we went C, any number of these random things could have happened as well. Like they could have spammed through smokes, they could have done all of this. Like, you're only saying we should have gone to C because A didn't work in this one instance. And having that hindsight analysis is really, I think, it's an easy way out of having to actually solve the game, because A didn't work, therefore the answer is clearly going to C or whatever it might be. Where in reality, like getting players to really move into like, regardless of what the outcome was, how could have we done this play better, or how could have we focused here? Like these micro thoughts, like what do we need to adjust here? Because yeah, like I said, in the moment, you're never going to know what the right solution is. Valorant is a game of imperfect information. Like you don't know everything that is existing at that exact moment, so you have to make a decision based on what you currently know, and you can't regret that decision in the future when you have all of the information. Because once you have all the information, it's very easy to decide what you should have done. And just moving players into that thought process of like, regardless of what the outcome of this round was, what could have we done to get like have a 5% better play, a 10% better play? Like even if that doesn't give us the win, like always be focused on like how could have we fixed some of these micro thinking points.
Yeah, and like, so like scrapping the whole thing is not the answer. Like honestly, like the correct answer could be like, oh well, let's shock the KJ alarm bot front B. Let's take our drone through garage and break the turret in there and make sure there's not like some piece of util holding these angles. Because maybe when we ran to A that last time, they realized we couldn't be B, they realized we couldn't be garage, and there was an op posted down C. And of course the other 4 players know we're going A. We can't be anywhere else. So like going and doing those things ahead of time would prevent that most likely. Obviously it increases the variance, because then you have to really think through how to like take A in the mid round. You have to then worry about fights in garage and stuff like that. But that's why like a lot of these things, it's not black and white. I think about FPS games and Valorant. I got my minor in math, so I think about it like a bell curve. Like, there's going to be times where slamming the C site is the correct answer. Is it the correct answer every time? No. There's going to be this like middle range where you should fall between, but there's also going to be times where I want to triple swing this angle with 0 util, and that's a good play in that moment, that one time. But that's not a consistent thing, That's how, and it's very hard for players to decipher those things without a lot of experience and like data in their brain. Like, it's just the only way to develop experience for something like that, I feel like.
Yeah, man, it's like the idea of trying to teach people these things. I think it's like we all have really good ideas of how to do it, but nobody's perfected of actually how to teach players how to think in like the process oriented, focus on the controllables, or focus on the micro thinking. it's such a difficult thing to teach people how to actually go about that, because especially in esports, one of the things that I noticed compared to traditional sports is that you are just slammed with results. Like, I exit a rank game, you have all your numbers. You exit a comp game, you have all your numbers, your headshot percentages, everything there is lined out for you. So the game is almost forcing you to think in results based. Whereas in traditional sports, you don't have that same level of analytics after every single game, and so you're able to think about the process of doing stuff like a little bit easier, I think.
Yeah, I think the people that compare like esports to traditional sports, it's just it's so bad.
Yeah,
it's so bad. I think you can kind of compare, like, maybe more so Counter-Strike than Valorant, but you can compare Counter-Strike to like golf because of how the circuit works and how like fandom works in golf, with people wanting to buy the gear, and people who watch golf typically like play golf. But like people who watch fucking, like LeBron throw up 40 points and dunk, like I can't do any of that shit. Like, I'll never be able to do any of that shit. I'm not buying his shoes so I can dunk. I can tell you that right now. Like, and the way just the economics work in that industry is so different. I would compare, like, the best like competitive analogy I think is like poker, because there's a lot of imperfect information. Like like, you don't know what the other person's holding in their hand. Whereas, like, say, like, you're playing basketball or football, all the players are on the fucking field. You know where everyone is. Like, everything's in front of you. Whereas, like, poker, like, you don't know what's in the other person's hand. And it's a game of, like, trying to, like, sniff out, like, what they're thinking. And, like, it's a mental game. There is a lot of variance involved, which is similar to, like, these FPS games and most esports, honestly. Like, and it's about controlling the variance, like understanding how to operate within it.
There's I should send you this interview that I think it was with Lex and Daniel Negreanu from poker, and I think it's a really interesting concept because he's talking with Daniel about, I can't remember the kid's name, but there's a new up and coming poker player, and Daniel's like, he plays a very non-standard game of poker, and he understands poker, but like he doesn't play the probability odds like I would. And he's like, poker has been largely solved in the past few years. Like, we understand what plays you should be making. We calculate percentages very easily. And so what the, like, quote unquote, like, right play is. But what this kid has done is he's learned the right play, the statistics of poker so well that he now knows how to push people to play suboptimal hands. And so, like, this kid will take suboptimal hands to push other people into doing, like, crazy stuff. He's like, it's a completely new way of thinking about poker, because he's playing suboptimal percentages, but not because he's, like, risking on it, but he understands how everybody else is thinking about the optimal percentages, and he's putting you in a really weird position because he understands it. Again, it's not like he's just YOLOing it out and throwing chips down or doing anything crazy, but it's because he has such an intricate understanding of how probability works within poker, and like the non-perfect information, he's able to manipulate people with that. And I think that's a really cool thought. Dude,
that's crazy, because there's so many pro CS players that have, and even pro Valorant players with like Caboose, that have switched to pro poker. I don't know if you knew that or not. Like,
I didn't know. No.
Do you know who Shaguar is?
Yep.
Shaguar was a pro poker player. Like, he switched to being a pro poker player. Yeah, he's won some serious fucking tournaments, actually, I think.
That's cool.
PTR from CSGO switched and went in poker, and because of that train of thought is exactly how I like in-game leading games. It's like, yeah, I know that this is the correct play. I know I should be doing this. I would tell people in a YouTube video to do this, but I also know the other team knows that I want to do that. So how are they going to react to that? Now I got to beat what they're going to do. And like, I'm trying to play like a step ahead. Yeah. And then there's times where I'm like, well, then they know that I know that. And then what's the next thing that they would do? They'd probably do something like this. And, like, you're constantly like trying to like mentally game the other team, like in that aspect. And it's so similar. I actually used to play a lot of poker before it became like really big. I would go to the casino and I learned all these percentages, like the top 10% of hands, top 20% of hands, like what it means to be on the button, what it means to be all over the place on the poker table. And I was very good at it, but I struggled with what you're talking about. Like, probably because I didn't have the volume of hands to just, I also didn't have a lot of money. So like, honestly, like every hand I lost felt like devastating. It's just like, yeah, you have to have that like don't give a fuck attitude. Like, if you want to be good at poker, like, you have to be like, I don't mind losing this money, like, because I have a lot of confidence in this decision in the long term. And I just didn't have, like, I just remember being like at the poker table, like making some outrageous plays, like outside of the expected means, like, because I start with like a certain way, and then like I would build into like these like a looser style, and these people would just like be like staring me down like on the fucking river, and I would just be like sweating. I would just be like, oh my god, dude, please don't call me. And I was like, this is not for me. Like, especially when people got really good at it.
Yeah. So you said that you build into looser plays. Is that because like you get more comfortable with the hands, or is it just like the nerves made you think about probability less?
It was more like I'd play like statistically correct, like at first, just that way, like I knew I had an edge in like the hands that I entered, but I could also like study the 9 players around me and just see like, you know, like what their train of thought was, if they were like loose players, if they were tight players, like how they played relative to the button, like what kind of bets did they do? Did they like 3-bet? Did they like what, like how were they betting? And I would like try to process like all of that info. And then later on, like I would know like, okay, if I play loose against the guy that's playing loose, then he'll perceive me as having a good hand because he's playing like shit. He's playing like shit. Like he's playing shit hands all the time. He's trying to bully around the table, and I've been playing tight. Like, so he thinks that I only bet when I have stuff. And right now I'm about to just actually just destroy him. And like, and then if I play like a tight player, and like the tight player is betting me heavy, I'm like, oh, fuck, this person has some shit. Like I gotta fold. Like they haven't been in any pot so far. Like, and this is the one that they're like fucking. They probably have like pocket jacks, and there's like a jack ace on the board right now. Like, like so. I like to just like soak in like a lot of data on like the players around me, and that's usually like how I operate. But obviously, I'm still playing the hands that are statistically really good in the early game.
Yeah. Okay, that makes sense. Yeah, fair enough. Poker, man. I used to play when I was a younger kid as well, but I haven't touched it in a while. Once I got into League of Legends, that's when I stopped.
Yeah, it's hard. People are really fucking good at it now. That's why I honestly stopped. I was like, people now, I felt like everyone knew the odds, like everyone knew how to play. It's like, I don't got the time to beat you guys. You guys are fucking getting really good. Like I was positive every time I played, but
yeah. I'll send you that clip with Daniel, though. I think you'll like it. It's a really cool clip. He explains it 40 times better than I did. But it's cool to see the way that he was talking about how some young kid came in, learned how to play, we'll call it like perfect poker, and then took perfect poker to play suboptimal poker that would, for lack of better words, like counter optimal poker. And it was like, it's a weird concept. But yeah, I'll send you the clip so you can see it. I don't know what time you have to get going at, but I have one more follow-up question that I want to run through if you have time.
Sure. Yeah, let's do one last question.
Cool.
Sure.
So, and this is going like right to the very beginning of our conversation because I've been holding on this one. And I was curious how what your thoughts were. So you were talking about simple. I think it was simple.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was. And you were asking me questions about like structuring teams, about training, practice, all that kind of stuff. And so this is like a question around like your thoughts on burnout, work ethic, grind, all those types of things. So Simple obviously was putting in more work than should be possible and did it consistently over a long period of time and produced results because of it. So I'm curious on like some people it seems like they practice for 2-3 hours a day and like that's too much already. Some people seems like they can put 12 hours day in and day out and they thrive. So I'm curious on like what are your thoughts from both a player perspective, a coach perspective, from your perspective now, like what do you think about that whole concept?
That's something like I've really like changed a lot on over the years. So like as a player, I was the person that had like no fucking quit. Like I was a lot like Simple in the fact that it was unhealthy. Like I would play before high school. I'd go to high school. I'd come back. I'd play. I'd go to bed super late. I'd repeat. The same thing. Like obviously I'd do it my college years too. So like, then I was on teams at the end of Counter-Strike where we'd like do like boot camps in Europe, and one of my players was like, I can't play more than 5 hours, like my eyes hurt. I'm just like, I was triggered. I was like, all right, I'm not gonna make this kid play, but like, what can we do here? So I tried to like solve around it, like, well, what if we just like watch VODs on the couch? Like, I'll break them all down from the laptop, like using some kind of tool, and you guys can just like watch. And like, that was my solution. I think there's ways to get better as a team without being directly in the game that don't fatigue you as much. And that was one of the things I really loved about like 100 Thieves. Like, I was comfortable. First of all, I think a lot of teams need to structure like their server-side prac time before practice. That's when people are like most sharp, they're most willing to learn, and it's fine to suck in scrims. That's what people literally just refuse to understand. Like, I was perfectly cool with the players being dog shit in scrims, like, which they probably hated, but but then that means like we're fucking practicing in flip-flops and we're putting on our Jordans for game day, you know? Like, I'm not doing 2 hours of server-side time on game day, but on a normal day, I'm literally lecturing them for like an hour and a half every day. It's like a lecture. And then, you know, I let them warm up and DM for like 30 minutes, and then they scrim like 4 scrims. 4 scrims from my like CSGO days is like laughable. But that is a lot in Valorant to process mentally, and there's a lot to go over with those 4 scrims. So I was fine doing it. I think that is probably like a good medium. I think scrimming like less than like 4 times a day, maybe like 3 times is okay, but I think you do need to spend time in the server like that playing. I think that's very important. You need to spend a good amount of time thinking about Valorant, which is what like the server side time was for. We would go on like walks sometimes as a team. We would fucking eat dinner together, and then honestly, like I didn't even do this. Like, so like I said, when we built a team, like I tried to find people that were friends with each other. So like I asked them like what they thought of like this person or that person, and like the people I was asking, like half of them didn't even end up on the team. But I had a really good idea that everyone would like each other, and then like at the end of practices, they would just like watch fucking weird shows and shit together. They'd watch like anime and stuff, and like bro, like whatever the Zoomies do, like they would do crazy shit together. Yeah, like after we won like LCQ, we all played like Raft together on Steam, which is
cool.
I mean, wasn't cool for me. They fucking literally stole all the loot and left me for dead. But they're savages in that game, let me tell you. But you know, like having those bonding hours like that is super important. And someone that I recently saw that did this was the Guard. Did you see this tweet? Man,
no,
they
I don't think so.
They approach things. Well, X the Guard at this point, but they approach things so right. They were talking about how they hardly even scrimmed when they were in Brazil winning Ascension League. It's a clip from Wyatt Rivers' podcast with Valen, and he talks about how like they hardly scrimmed because they couldn't, so they just played like Uno. They played fucking Uno as practice, and they just like shit on everyone. It was the best they've ever played. And it's not probably that they were only playing Uno. They're probably also like talking about the game a lot. Like they're doing a lot of theoretical talk about the game, and most of Valorant is theoretical. It's like, if we see this happening, how are we going to react? Like if you know, I have this ult, like, you know, what do we want to do with it? Like, this is, and most of the time, honestly, the players have the best ideas. They're the ones that fucking play the agents every day in top tier ranked, and they're the ones that scrim. So like, giving the players that agency, which I'm sure Josh did, is a really smart play. I think like that's super important.
Yeah, I agree. And I think like even from my own side of things, and I think this goes for a lot of areas as well, but I find that if I am, you know, having like a session with a player, or we have like a team call or a team meeting, and I'm talking about stuff, like we're talking about stuff and there's value in it, but I find that the place where I get the most impact with players is when like we're just like walking down the street to grab coffee, or we're sitting in the SR HQ just around a table or whatever. It's like those casual conversations, and I think they're undervalued for the game as well, where if you like have a team that's just playing Uno, playing games together, going for walks, hanging out, watching movies, they are going to passively talk about the thing that they love the most, which is the game, because that's like at the root of it, like that's their biggest passion. They will naturally start to talk about that, and like the ideas will flow, the conversation will happen, people will start to like synthesize some of that information a little bit better because they're actually like dialed into that conversation rather than having to sit there and listen to me talk at them. They're actually like synthesizing things. And I like that a lot. So it makes sense why, or like with what you said with the guard and playing Uno and everything like that, because those conversations, from my perspective, seem to have a greater impact is when you just have players that are together, that like being there, and they're just talking and debating ideas in the game.
Yeah. I don't even remember the initial question.
The grind side of things.
Oh, the grind side of things. So I think like that aspect is important, because another thing about that is like 100 Thieves, they knew like I have a family, like I have like other obligations and stuff, but I also wanted to coach this team, and it was very draining. Like, I'm not gonna lie, like the days were crazy long, but they were like, you don't got to go to the boot camps, you don't got to do these things. And I'm like, no, that is where you're wrong. Like, I actually do have to go to the boot camps. Like, I have to go through this hell with them, or they will not respect my opinion. Like,
yeah,
I actually
100%,
have to be
100%.
there. And if I'm not there, they won't respect me. Like, and they might say that they would, but I know from like being on all these teams that they would sense that I'm not bought in. And like, I refused to do it. Like, I had to be there. Like, I had, even though I didn't want to be there. And I felt I could obviously work from home. Like, I could join the server from my house and be on Discord and shit like that. Like, that is not how you win. Like, the grind together is super important in esports. Like,
it's kind of like the idea of shared suffering. Like, when you're in the trenches with the other people, like, going through that together is what binds you guys. Like, that's what brings it together. That's what builds a relationship. Them being in the grind while you're going to be in your comfy bed, working from home, in your pajamas, like, they're not going to feel that same level of, like, suffer together. But yeah, I agree. I think that's very important. Like, you should be there with your team, even if, like, they're doing most of the work. Be there and sacrifice with them, suffer with them, build together. Like, that's huge.
Yeah, I think the other thing that, like, a lot of those, like, extracurricular activities, I guess you'd call them, like, even just, like, eating together, or, like, going walking around the block or something, or playing Uno, or playing a random game online, or watching a show. All of that, even if you're not talking about the game, helps you learn how the other person thinks and communicates. So that way, when you're in high-pressure scenarios, when, you know, like, you don't want to be wrong because this is your job and what you put all of your time into, you're okay with that person disagreeing with you, because you understand them on, like, I don't know, like a deeper basis. Like, you've built the bond, and you understand how they communicate with you outside of the work environment. And I think that is very, very important, because, you know, like, a lot of gamers in general are just very anxious and not very social people, you know, like myself being one of them. It took me a lot of time to learn how to, like, talk to people. And yeah, I think that is probably like a big helping aspect of that whole, you know, situation.
Yeah, I agree. I really do think that, and that's why I say, like, culture is very important, and it can't be forced, but it also can't be accidental. But, like, if you put together a team that likes being together, they will understand each other better. They will sync up better. They'll have better synergy. They'll trust each other more. You have all of those things in place. Like, of course, they're going to be a better team. Of course. And there's, you might have heard this guy, Simon Sinek. I don't even know how to say his last name.
No.
He does essentially sports psych, but for businesses, and he has a talk. I'll send you this clip as well, so remind me. But he does a brief little talk to a crowd, and he's talking about how when he was working with the Navy SEALs, and he asked a question of, like, how do you guys choose who is actually on SEAL Team 6? Like, how do you guys go about the process of picking out which people are on there? And he's like, the answer was a little bit shocking, and he draws this graph, and it's the trust and performance graph, and he's like, they will essentially, like, trial or put people through who are the highest of high performers, most fit, most gifted, strongest, whatever it is, but they are, like, shitty people. They're not trusted. They don't have good relationships or whatever it is, and so they're very low on the trust side of things. He's like, we will not pick those. We would rather pick someone who's slightly lower on performance, but is very high on trust, because you'll have a team that, like, works together. Everybody trusts that person trusts everybody. They get along. They do all of these things together. And even though they're, like, slightly lower on the performance scale, they will outperform as a unit more than if they had that like, one high performer that was low on trust. But I think that's like an important concept thinking about games as well, is that you need 5 people who trust each other, that want to be around each other. Otherwise, they will always, even if their ceiling is like way up here, they'll always underperform because they just don't work well together. There's no synergy. There's no want to be with each other in the trenches. There's no like after scrim games, nothing of that. And you just lose so much when you don't have a team doing those things.
Yeah, it's like how esports started, but like what it lost when all the money came in, and people just started considering it more as like a job. Like when I first, I don't even know if you'd call it esports. Like I said, like I was like playing like 1.6 and shit like that, like 1.5. Like, you know, there was no money. You did it because you wanted to do it. So when the scrims were over, you'd all just sit there and you would fucking like, I don't know, you may just like go join like a hide and seek server or some shit. You may like watch like a TV show that you just torrented or something. I didn't say that, ACT, but like, you know, like you might do like any of those things, but you would sit in that chat because you had nothing else to do and you didn't really consider this a job. You considered it something you wanted to do and you wanted to be with these people. Whereas like now it's like you've been forced to play with like these 4 people. This guy's your coach. This guy is your assistant coach. And when the day is over, you're just like, man, I'm exhausted. Like I didn't want to be by those people. But you don't have to feel that way. You can build those relationships. And I feel like a lot of that is missing in current gaming culture.
I agree with that a lot. And I think the passion needs to be there. You can't if it's just a job, you're going to struggle with doing the grind parts of it. But like, so jumping back just a little bit to the grind part, and then we can probably wrap it up there because we've been chatting for probably almost close to 2 hours now at this point. But I'm kind of conflicted on the grind side of things because from the performance world, there's often a talk of like the work-life balance, make sure you're not pushing too hard. The other side of things is like, I don't know anybody who's ever reached the top that didn't just grind mindlessly sometimes. I shouldn't say mindlessly. That didn't push a lot of limitations. And so I'm always like stuck on this. Like, at what point are you pushing a player too hard? And at what point is a player needing to push too hard in order to achieve that final like upper echelon, beat the margins, those types of things? And it's something I don't know what the answer is to, because you can clearly see that a lot of people burn out if they push too hard. But then somebody like Simple or Faker or anybody in like Rocket League or Apex or R6, like the top of the top are the ones that are putting in endless amounts of hours. And so it seems like a good chunk of pros can get away with like having a balance, but the ones that are going to be the absolute like goats of the pro scene, they will never have that balance because they have to go harder than everybody else, and they seem to have like an innate way of defending against burnout because they have just such a deep passion, love, obsession, whatever it might be. They just like, they have to know the game deeper, so they go harder and harder and harder. Yeah. And I struggle with understanding where those limits are.
I think a lot of it is people probably perceive like once they hit certain levels that they have all of the info. It's like a second hump on the Dunning-Kruger, I feel like there's a shit, like a second hump where like they think their learning is over. I still learn shit, but there's also like people like, wasn't Shaq notorious for like not practicing free throws?
Yep.
Yeah, he could have just been significantly better, but he didn't give a fuck to practice his free throws. And like Dwight Howard clearly like is like a freak that could have been like insane too. Like I played with players that are immense talents, but like they don't want to put in that effort. And it is an interesting conversation because I do think there's something to like that success being like their mental well-being, like their ability to feel happy about the things they do. And if they feel like they're grinding themselves into the ground, then they're not going to play as well. Or maybe they would play better. Like, I don't know. Like,
but I don't know either.
That's like an interesting question. Like, I don't try to like infringe on people's like thoughts about the grind because I grinded an unhealthy amount coming up and try to expect that of the players on my team. Like I was never in like extracurricular sports and stuff while I played games, but like someone like Nothing played like hockey, and eventually he had to like give up hockey because our teammates just got like super pissed at him. Like he was like missing a practice a week to go play hockey, and it's like, dude, we're gonna get paid to do this at this point. Like, you kind of gotta fucking drop the hockey league. So there's stuff like that, and that's a hard question, because I despise grind culture, but I also enjoy it because it really brings out like the actual best available.
Yeah. Well, and this is like part of, go to that Michael Phelps documentary, is like, he had, in order to be the version we know of Phelps, he had to give up everything.
Yeah.
But in the pursuit of giving up everything, of achieving those goals, it almost cost his life. And so, like, that's one of the things I struggle with is it seems like the goats are the goats, like the best in the world, MJ, Phelps, Woods, all the people in esports, they go harder than anybody else think is possible, but the average professional doesn't. Like, the average professional should or can have the work-life balance. Maybe not the work-life balance, but they don't have to go into that grind culture as much, but they probably will never hit their peak either. But I don't know if you can force somebody to grind, because once you force somebody to grind, if it's not coming from internal, like if it's not something they want to do, if you force it, they're going to burn out and they're going to hate their life.
Yeah, I think it's like one of those things where like ignorance is bliss, right? Like, I think a lot of those grinders, I think like they might have been like raised in a certain way, or they might have experienced different things in life, or maybe they don't have joy from like doing other things, but their competitive side brings them like all the joy. So like you can't, I don't think you can drill that into someone. Like, if someone is raised in a household where like family is super important, and like, you know, like we spend 3 nights every single week with family, like, you know, like you're not going to take that out of them and have them be a happy person wanting to grind. You know, like a lot of these people that are like the best of the best, they had traumatic childhoods. They had like these things like you were talking about, and they went through some like really hard times, and it's unfair to expect other people to do that willingly. And even if they were to do that willingly, like, is that even a good decision? Like, that's a horrible decision, I feel like, especially in esports.
It's almost undoubtedly going to cost you something. Again, like, Phelps is the easiest reference here. He did that, achieved something that nobody else has ever achieved and probably won't for a very long time, but it did cost him something, and that was like health, well-being, almost his life. Like, so yeah, I don't think it's something that you can ever, there's going to be certain minimums that people have to meet, like certain amounts of scrims they have to play or pubs they have to play, but I don't think you can force somebody to go into the grind, because they will burn out. But one of my thoughts too is that if I have a player that is very much like of the grind mentality, my job isn't necessarily to stop them from doing that, because I'm not going to try and impose a balance on them. My job is to make sure that they are able to be as happy and healthy as possible while doing that. So like teaching them how to like process things or cope with things, so that while they are doing that, they're not crashing and burning or shutting down or losing all these other aspects. So I would never impose it on somebody, but I would never take it away from somebody either.
Yeah, like a lot of the times the people that have that grind culture, they probably aren't like super tight knit with like a lot of friends or maybe even family. They probably don't have a lot of knowledge about like nutrition, like because they've just been so tunnel vision on this one thing through the key years of their life. You know, like they probably don't stretch very often, and likely aren't like going to the gym a lot. So these are all things that can like extend the longevity of something like that, because I mean, like it's not like the basketball player, the football player, you know, Tiger Woods playing golf. Like, it's not like that in gaming. Like, you're sedentary in a seat. Like, a lot of times, like, poor posture develops and stuff like that. So there are things that will happen that will slow down that grind, and it's very important to like be aware of that and to make those adjustments. And that's like the one thing that I would fear for in that is just like, you know, teaching those players like the importance of like taking care of their body, because it will catch up. It will in gaming.
Yeah, it's interesting. We'll see what happens. I mean, I don't think I mentioned this, but like with the PhD that I'm working on, the research we're doing is taking a look at a lot, because I'm fascinated by this, because I'm fascinated by what enables some people to push harder than anybody else, and at what point does like fatigue set in, and a lot of that is what I'm looking at within some of the research I'm doing in my PhD. It's like, how do brains actually work when we're looking at stuff like fatigue and Burnout and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I think it's like, I would be willing to guess that like a lot of those like hard grinders, they just like happen to have stumbled into like a great sleep regimen, and maybe like they might like not even know it, but like meditate through like breathing and like just like kind of just like, you know, allowing like their brain to relax, which is super important, to not be always high strung and not be always like crazy. Like one of the craziest players actually that I've seen recently was Bang from 100 Thieves, and like he took in like 0 caffeine, but yet he was still like a grinder. Like he didn't need caffeine, and he had like some of the best aim I've ever seen. And I feel like that, like stuff like that is probably good. Like he probably gets very good quality sleep every single night. He takes care of his body without needing to go to the gym. Exactly. Like that kind of stuff seems important to me.
Yeah, that's very cool. I didn't know that about Bang.
Yeah.
It's interesting. All right. Well, I know we've been chatting for a long time. Did you have anything else you want to run through? Should we wrap it up there?
Dude, I can't think of anything. We've talked about a lot.
I'm sure we'll have another one of these at some point in the future. There's still a few things that I'd love to chat to you about. One primarily being, I'm very curious on the transition from going from a player into a coach into like a content creator, analyst, broadcast talent, streamer kind of side of things. Like, I'm very curious because you're one of the few people that has like successfully navigated all three of those spaces, and so I want to learn more about like that process for you. But I think that's probably a conversation for a different time. And then I have a couple other things, so maybe we should do one of these again in the future. But just wrap it up there for now.
Yeah, I'm down. Yeah, it's been a wild ride. So yeah, that would be a long one. But
yeah.
It wasn't easy as like a precursor, like mentally. But,
yeah, I believe it.
Yeah.
That's why because that's like the whole point of my series that I'm trying to do is show what it's actually like, or what people go through, like how they become pro, why they become pro, what they do to sustain it, how they transition. Like, I'm very curious, and this kind of goes into how you said you should the second Dunning-Kruger bump that you're mentioning. Like, when I came into the field, I realized that players and coaches know a hell of a lot more about a lot of stuff than I ever will, and I want to be learning from them, because like the knowledge and the expertise that they have, it's not going to be found in research, it's not going to be found in books, it's because it's like a lived experience. And so the point of these conversations that I'm trying to get at is like learning from players, coaches, content creators, whatever it is, about like everything they've experienced, and then how that applies for other people or for like viewers to then take that and apply it to their own journey.
Yeah, dude, I fucking respect it. I love it. Like, that's that's like how I live my life. That's what I want to do with like my series too. Is just like, bro, I don't know all these things. Someone teach me. Like, there's all these good people in the scene. Just, I don't know. It's so easy to just defer to someone smarter. Yeah.
All right, man. Well, it was great chatting. That was a long conversation. This is going to be a big episode. So, anyways, thanks for sharing your knowledge. Thanks for all the expertise, and looking forward to the next one.
Of course. You too, man. Peace, Landon.
Right on, brother.